When we get an album? Come on.
Man, don't do me like that, bro. ASAP.
Cap.
My first time back on the stage. Album's finished. Don't be dumb. Let's go.
Cap.
My opinion changes a lot, and I might make a song, and if I don't put it out in a timely manner, I'm over that.
Cap.
You know, we've been waiting for a new album for you.
I'm a perfectionist, and I think that every time I had said everything that I need to say, something else happens, something new happens, something else to talk about.
Cap.
And I've been working on this material for a while now, tweaking it and fixing it and whatnot.
Cap.
ASAP Rocky has done this to himself.
Lobbies and Gentlegrams, ASAP Rocky stopped, dropped, and rolled out his album for the last 7 years, and my ears off some quick listens give it a... From Purple Swag starts to Fashion Killer Freak Offs, Live Love ASAP launched Rocky, then Long Live ASAP got him cocky. From pesos to prancing on Paris runways, Pretty Flocko proudly polished his craft and then made mob members stars out of the stash and reinvented fashion with rafts. R.I.P. to Yams, he'd be proud of where Rocky's gone, but after testing songs in 2018, Rocky's been gone. His legacy long lived on, but at last we live, love, and laugh again as Rocky blasts his pen on another classic stem. Or is it a trash album? Let's break it all down, but first stop sitting around, pound the like and subscribe button straight into the ground.
I study
Rapaholics
for a living.
Now, Lobbies and Gentlegrams, congratulations if you're an ASAP Rocky fan, alright? The man hasn't released an album since 2018. Could this have been the largest gap between albums in hip-hop history? We'll break that down later in this video, but in honor of the release of this album taking so freaking long, every couple of minutes throughout this video, I'm going to go through a significant event that has happened since ASAP Rocky released his last album, just so you have an idea of how much time it has truly been. I mean, the biggest event probably is the fact that COVID-19 did not exist the last time we got an ASAP Rocky album.
Stop taking steps close to me before I start coughing this shit. Before I start coughing this shit. I'm not playing. I start coughing. I start coughing. You see my nose running? I'm exposed to the virus. Give me 6 feet.
We're testing the potatoes. Come on. Oh no, it's not the COVID-19. The potatoes got the COVID-19. Oh no. The potatoes.
I don't know if I tested positive or negative. Should I tested positive?
Now, it's sad to me because I remember growing up being like 13 years old, and the myth of Dr. Dre's detox finally seemed like it would actually see the light of day. Drop a comment if you remember this time. We were getting singles like Kush with Akon, I Need a Doctor with Eminem. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Detox was an album Dre started teasing in around 2002. And those Akon and Eminem singles only released in 2011, 9 years later. Like, if Dre had an actual copy of Detox, that thing probably could have sold for like $10 million at the time. And if you're adjusting for inflation in 2026, it was probably like $100 million album. Just because he took forever to release it. Those 100 million
Big nights are for me.
But back then, I feel like the idea of these mythical albums that were taking forever to release, no one knew, if they would actually get released or not. That whole concept at the time was really exclusive to just Dr. Dre and Detox. No one really took these insane amount of years to release their next work. I mean, even rappers like 50 Cent, whose presence didn't really feel felt in the early 2010s. Like, it felt like there was a big absence from 50. It wasn't even that long. He put out Before I Self-Destruct in, I believe, 2009 or 10, and then Animal Ambition released in 2014. That's only 5-6 years. Think about lately how many rappers have taken that same length of time in between releases. It's almost become like a standard at this point, or damn near a marketing strategy. Like, not being present in 2026 is actually helping your brand rather than hurting it. Look at Frank Ocean, right? Like, he could take a week to create an album, but just because of the hype, that thing would sell like 1 million in the first week, and a week of work for Frank Ocean would translate into dozens of millions of dollars. And if you guys want to make some money too, then you got to check out Tester Up. It's a free app on the App Store where they'll literally pay you to play mobile games and fill out surveys. It's super easy to sign up. Just scan the QR code you see on the screen or hit the link in the description of this video. Download the Tester Up app, make an account, super easy with just your phone number or email. Then check out the list of games they offer and start getting paid to play. My whole point with the whole trend of rappers taking ages to drop their next project is just to say that it's weird that it's become a norm given the fact that we live in this internet age where everything moves so quick, our attention spans are so small. Meanwhile, the artists who are at the top of the game are the ones who are releasing the least frequently. I mean, remember that like evil supervillain pharmacist guy, Martin Shkreli, who was literally like collecting all of these exclusive albums that were never releasing, like the Wu-Tang album, the Carter 5, like he was buying these at auctions? That didn't exist before Detox, but now, again, it's a norm. I mean, Baby Keem has taken almost 5 years to release a project. J. Cole announced the fall off like 5-6 years ago. He's only releasing it in 2 weeks. Kendrick took like 5 years to drop Mr. Morale. Travis Scott took 5 years to drop Utopia. Playboi Carti took 5 years to release I Am Music. See the trend? The biggest superstars in music are purposely not releasing music. I mean, Rihanna, Rocky's own girlfriend, hasn't released an album in a decade. But Rocky's case was really weird because unlike, the Carter 5 where everyone was waiting to hear what it would sound like, unlike a Rihanna or Frank Ocean where people have basically made a meme out of them not releasing new music, with A$AP Rocky, it's not like he hasn't released music over the last 7 years. There's been dozens of singles. It's not like he hasn't been teasing the release of this album since his previous project. He's been teasing it the entire time.
Like the full project.
Are you working on one right now?
Yeah.
But you're going to perform one of the songs today, right?
I'm performing one of the new songs.
But it was kind of weird because none of the music that he released in promotion of this album had any impact. That's probably why he had to continuously push the project back. But even with these singles kind of flopping, even with no new album from Rocky for 7 years, somehow he always still felt very relevant and present within pop culture. Even with just a few singles released over 7 years, he was still headlining Rolling Loud, breaking barriers in the fashion industry, and I mean, in 2025 alone, he had his highest streamed year on Spotify, with barely any new music out. So going into this project was kind of interesting because, again, all the singles, the new music he was putting out wasn't really resonating, but just his persona, maybe his old catalog, and I mean, I guess you could say his love life, all these factors, they were all kind of carrying Rocky's relevancy throughout the years. But let's keep it focused on hip-hop. Also, remember how I said I would sprinkle in some random things that have happened since the last A$AP Rocky album? Yeah, we've gotten 7 Drake albums since the last A$AP Rocky release. And if you guys want to feel really old, I mean, the fact that A$AP Rocky hasn't put out an album since 2018 means that there is an entire generation of human beings who have just never experienced new A$AP Rocky music. Like, let's say the average age you start discovering music on your own is around 9 or 10 years old. That means that anyone really like 16, 17 or younger, even if they've been listening to hip-hop for a lot of their teenage years, they may have never even grown up with Rocky being like a relevant artist on their playlist or in their lives. And in that same window that Rocky was not dropping new music, these guys probably turned to artists like Travis or Playboi Carti, who ascended into superstardom throughout that entire generation where Rocky was just absent, basically. So going into this album, Rocky was kind of in an interesting position, right? He may not necessarily have that loyalty from the younger generation, which is what you want if you really want to maintain this higher level of superstardom, right? That's why we see Drake always chase the youthful artists or the youthful trends. Even Kendrick and J. Cole, because of their ever-evolving sounds and the moments they've created over the 2020s decade, they've still been able to amass massive support from the younger generation of hip-hop listeners. But then you have artists like Wale, Joey Badass, Chance the Rapper, artists who came up in a similar era to A$AP Rocky, but they, over the past few years, have failed to attract the youth, not because their new material isn't good. In fact, it's the opposite, and they're getting more praise than they have probably in their whole careers. But it's more so because their sound isn't congruent to what this current generation cares about.
Too much West Coast licking.
And I think Rocky's in a weird position where he's kind of in the middle between, the biggest superstars in the game, even if they're approaching 40 years old, even if they've been in the game for 15 years, they still have the attention, the support, and the love from the youth and from the older generations. Meanwhile, you have, some people from Rocky's class, like the Chances, Joey's, Big Sean, Wale, etc., who still have the strong support of my generation, the guys who grew up in the late 2000s, early 2010s, but they failed to kind of resonate with the youth and ascend to new levels. But I say Rocky's in the middle because we saw a lot of his new singles that he kept releasing over the last 3-4 years. Yes, he was really teasing this project, trying to get it out for almost half a decade. all those singles pretty much flopped, right? Which kind of indicated a similar pattern to a Wale, to a Joey, where they're missing that connection to the youth, but
I study for a living.
At the same time, like I mentioned before, Rocky just had his most streamed year on Spotify in 2025, with barely any new music coming out. He's having all of these old songs from his catalog from like 7 to 10 years ago just randomly climb up the charts now in 2025, indicating that his sound is now going viral on TikTok and resonating with the youth. So there's this weird dichotomy of like, his brand is still very relevant. His name, his catalog, his presence, it's all still felt within the culture, but his new music wasn't necessarily being the catalyst to help his brand grow, right? And going into this album, I think Rocky was at this weird crossroads where he can either really take a position like Tyler, the Creator, who has constantly evolved and added new layers, new identity to his sound, and has therefore been able to connect with a wider and a new audience. Rocky could take that approach, or he could go the Joey Badass route where he stays being a great rapper, but his sound doesn't necessarily evolve, so he doesn't really elevate his impact or his numbers. Like, Rocky has done enough where he can kind of just lean into being like that cool legacy act, but I think he also possesses the creative ability to kind of force himself in becoming an active architect of this next era. And he's able to be in this paradox because I think people underestimate how influential Rocky really was throughout the 2010s. Like, no, it was never about one specific verse or even one song or project in particular with Rocky. It was more the moment, the aesthetic, the drive to push his experimentalness, if that's an expression. It was the aura, it was the energy. All that stuff combined is what kind of led Rocky to become one of the most influential artists of the 2010s.
I had to fight something in the bathroom, no homo. We slipping on something. We niggas was jerking off in the bathroom. Yeah. Me, I got that out of there, all that shit. You know, this is parts of the story that I don't like to tell because it don't sound believable. Yeah. Spicy.
I think it's important to remind people that when A$AP Rocky first came out, like, he was
slipping on something.
He was getting a lot of hate for kind of being a rebel to what the standard was with hip-hop. Obviously, him being from Harlem, being from New York, he had barely recorded music before 2011. And it took him just a couple months to create this damn near classic mixtape that really didn't sound like anything coming out of New York ever at that period of time. It sounded like some slowed, screwed up Houston or Memphis music. Like, it was very slow, trippy, psychedelic. This was the project that got me into A$AP Rocky. Live, Love, A$AP, classic.
I'm Texas Trail, but in and by we spit it slow.
But it was very misunderstood at the time. The whole A$AP movement was definitely a product of the blog era, with Yams even really cultivating and forming the brand in the early days through online platforms like Tumblr. But the previous generation didn't necessarily understand the internet. This is when radio was still a big thing. This is when regionality, if that's a word, was very important within hip-hop, right? And you had this Harlem native who sounded like a Houston artist. People were saying, you know, he was kind of stealing from the South. But everything about A$AP Rocky was most definitely New York, was Harlem. I mean, when Rocky was a teenager and his father got incarcerated, him and his mother and sister were homeless, living in shelters, which was a formative aspect within his identity growing up, literally witnessing the action and the evolution of the heart of the city. He was homeless in New York City. And the entire A$AP collective was formed off the heels of A$AP Yams doing an unpaid internship for the New York collective that was running hip-hop right before A$AP Mob, the Diplomats.
A$AP was a bunch of, you know, it was a regular crew. We all just put our talents together and did something constructive.
Young Yams, bitch, Uncle Yams, man, respect this man. We see him.
So even though, again, Rocky's sound was kind of unconventional at the time, people didn't fully get it, there's no doubt that he just embodied a new era of New York. And just that alone is influential for the fact that if you look at New York artists today, or New York hip-hop, it doesn't sound anything alike to the 90s or the 2000s. Everyone's got their own kind of pocket, right? You had the more melodic New York artists like A Boogie or Lil TJ. You had the whole drill movement with Fabio Foreign and Pop Smoke. But I don't even think Rocky's influence was felt on the next couple generations of New York artists, right? And that speaks to the whole point of that Rocky was a pioneer in New York rappers kind of having their own unique style. I think where Rocky really made his mark on culture was the fact that, again, it wasn't just about the bars or the music with Rocky. It was about the energy that he brought, the aesthetic, the fashion, the experimentation to every new release. Rocky was never a rapper's rapper. It was actually Yams who was almost like his sensei to push Rocky to rap better, to find his voice.
I really got to fart right now.
Let it out, man.
Alright, so don't look at me like a creep after it happens. I'm literally about to fart on national.
Yams had said in an interview speaking on Rocky that when I first met him, he sounded like Kid Cudi mixed with Lil Wayne. He used to sound more like a stoner rapper, and I just wasn't trying to hear it, not trying to hear about people getting high and smoking doobies. I was trying to hear some real stuff. When I first met Rocky, he had only recorded 3 tracks and had barely ever gone in the studio before. He didn't know how to work. It sounded like he was mumbling. He needed to get everything together. Yams was like the strategizer and the tastemaker all in one. He was the curator.
I'ma hit him with the gospel, hit him with the rifle. I'm higher than the Eiffel Tower, hustle hard and snow sleep showers. Ain't worried about who's hot and who's hotter. Like crabs in the barrel, trying to pull you to the bottom. You get him, I got him, point him out, I spot him, red dot him, I shot him, I hide him, you find him. Go to the club and I order gold bottles. Shorty get low, but I'm no flow rider. And the 6'4" spokes like a low rider. The coupe so special, you can call it Movada. But I'm a known rider, and I'm a provider. Black on black bent fire like the Ghost Rider. Don't need a Ghost Rider because my flow's tighter. Your career is nosediving. I'ma pull an all-nighter.
He was the one who inspired Rocky to create that, hazy, dreamlike, lo-fi, psychedelic, fuzzy sound that's so prevalent in Rocky's music that would also later inspire artists like Travis, Carti, Uzi, Tyler, and many more. See, like I said before, while Rocky's influence on the genre today kind of goes unnoticed, it's more so because it's what Rocky represented that made him influential. He was really one of the first few artists who showed the world that you didn't need to quote-unquote sound like your city or your region. Rocky always talked about being from Harlem, but sounded nothing like a Harlem artist, and he said he didn't really listen to old-school New York rap when he was coming up.
I'm Texas Trail, but in and by we spit it slow.
He kicked down a lot of doors because, again, he got a lot of backlash for quote-unquote stealing from the South early in his career, and between the way he dressed and the trippy, hypnotic, syrupy, cloudy type music, Rocky was initially regarded as a rebel. And this would turn him into the influential prototype that other rappers would eventually mold their style off of. I mean, although Rocky kind of blew up after Tyler, you would see Tyler, the Creator, venture off into a lot more psychedelic, moody, melodic type of music that sounds nothing like the sound you would hear from an LA rapper. You also had Travis Scott, who was producing sounds that feel more like something an Atlanta rapper would make rather than a Houston native. I mean, Rocky sounded more like a Houston native than Travis himself.
I'm Texas Trail.
And then you had Lil Uzi, same thing. He didn't sound like a Philly artist, he sounded like an Atlanta rapper. Or look at Playboi Carti over the last few years. I mean, that whole rage movement, that sounds nothing like the Atlanta trap scene that was very dominant throughout Carti's, developmental stage as an artist. And I think all these rappers not necessarily being, tied to the native sounds of their region, not necessarily being tied to, a certain aesthetic or style. They kind of always evolve their fashion while still being extremely influential in streetwear, in fashion in general. I think that blueprint derives from what A$AP Rocky was able to do in the early 2010s. So do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, it was never about the bars. It was never about a verse in particular or a song or even an album. It was about everything that A$AP Rocky embodied. That's why he's able to still connect to this generation, because so much of what makes the superstars of today resonate with the youth is the exact blueprint that A$AP Rocky first laid down and got a lot of backlash for initially. I mean, he was very quickly embraced, but I definitely think it was A$AP Rocky who helped kick the door down for these artists and several others who dominate, this generation to not necessarily be confined to the look or the sound or the identity of their hometown.
As far as everybody being equal, color, homosexuality.
And while his first mixtape was unconventional in the sense that he took a lot from Memphis and Houston hip-hop, his debut album, once he had the budget from the label, completely defied the boundaries of the genre of hip-hop in general. He was blending punk, rock, EDM, techno, pop. It was extremely experimental, while at its core, Rocky was still rapping at a very high level. He never compromised his skill set as an MC. And on a side note, the irony that would foreshadow a lot of what we'd see in the rollout of A$AP Rocky's new album is the fact that one of my favorite songs by A$AP Rocky, just based off nostalgia factors, is Riding with Lana Del Rey. And I hadn't realized until researching this video that that song had actually leaked, and it was supposed to be one of the cuts off his first album. And if you guys know anything about the rollout for his latest project, that was a big factor of why it was delayed for almost half a decade. But we'll get to that shortly. Aside from that being one of my favorite Rocky songs, most definitely my favorite Rocky album came in the form of his sophomore, At Long Last A$AP, and I think this is where Rocky really made the conversation for being like fourth place in that big three. This second album was Rocky attempting to make a unilateral masterpiece. That's what he said, and to me, that's definitely what it ended up becoming. I mean, Rocky kind of really took like a Quincy Jones, Kanye West type of approach with this project, integrating these different sounds, different artists from all different types of genres into his world in a very calculated way, almost like a puppeteer. A big standout to me was the incorporation of the British singer/guitarist Joe Fox, who created some of the most memorable hooks of Rocky's career and really of the 2010s. Holy Ghost, Far Side, Fine Wine, Jukebox Joints. The vocals laid by Joe Fox on these tracks, they were hypnotizing, haunting, and soul-bearing all in one. This to me is my favorite A$AP Rocky album, just for the cohesiveness. I feel like this is where Rocky just kind of perfected every element that makes him great, whether it's his taste in different genres and ability to incorporate them into his music, whether it's the variety in energy levels, going from something more slow and moody, like a Far Side, to something a little more pop or alternative oriented, like a Everyday, to then something upbeat and inherent to hip-hop, like a M's with Lil Wayne, or Lord Pretty Flacco Jody Part 2. Rocky was more experimental than ever here, but it sounded like he executed on something that could be loved by the masses. And at this point in time, the sales and the hits, they may have not been there to compete with, you know, the biggest rappers in the game at the time, the Drakes and the Kendricks. Spicy. Or even like the Coles, the Meek Mills, the Big Seans, but just due to the sheer experimentation and the quality of the three bodies of work that Rocky had put out by 2015, he was easily making the conversation for, again, being one of the best MCs of the 2010s and trailing right behind J. Cole for that third position of the big three. Like, before Tyler, the Creator, Future, Travis Scott, Nicki Minaj could, you know, make their way into the conversation of maybe being in that fourth place behind the big three, it was really A$AP Rocky who I think was the clear standout and the lock-in for that position. And that's what actually made me go back and try to rank, in my opinion, the Big 10 of the 2010s. Now, this list was hard to make, and it'll probably change by the time I actually post this video. I mean, this is judging off rappers who blew up in 2009 or later and judged only by their output from 2010 to 2020, meaning artists like Tyler, the Creator, he had a massive run in the 2020s, and if we're judging based off their entire catalog, he would definitely rank higher, but in the 2010s, he wasn't as impactful as he maybe is today. And this list, the criteria is just basically based off the bodies of work you released, the influence you had on either the next generation or your generation, the moments you created, and the success you had. Because yes, it's not all about the numbers, but sometimes the numbers don't necessarily lie, right? And as much as you guys say, I hate Drake, I'm a Drake hater, I do think Kendrick and Drake are interchangeable if you're talking about output from the 2010s, because I do think Drake's first 3 or 4 projects were phenomenal. I just think the drop-off was very heavy, to say the least. I still definitely give Kendrick the edge just because, I mean, the run from Section 80 to Damn, Drake has very few projects that compare to any of Kendrick's, but Kendrick was more quiet towards the back half of the 2010s, while Drake kept doing the feature runs, the bloated projects that you can maybe find, you know, a couple songs out of like 25 that you enjoyed.
I study
bloated projects
for a living.
Anyways, this is an ASAP Rocky video. This type of conversation could be a topic for another video, but this type of list is very hard to make, and I wasn't trying to make it in terms of who my personal favorites are, but more so in terms of if there was like a Hall of Fame, which rappers put up the most points throughout that entire decade. I mean, I don't really listen to Nicki Minaj that much. I don't listen to Big Sean that much, but there's no denying the runs that they had. The influence Nicki had on female hip-hop. Or how about the fact that at one point, everyone in the game from Lil Wayne to Kanye to Drake were using Big Sean's flow. I mean, if we had recency bias, there's no way that Meek Mill would rank above a Tyler or a Travis Scott. But were you guys around when Dreams and Nightmares intro came out? When I'm a Boss came out? When the whole Dream Chasers mixtape series was constantly crashing that piff? When he took that monstrous L to Drake, but then somehow revived his career with Dream Chasers 4? Like, sure, if we're talking straight rapping, guys like Wale, Freddie Gibbs, Big Crit, it almost feels unfair to leave them off this list. But if we're talking all around, who controlled the decade? Who had the largest impact? Who had the biggest moments? None of them had an Astroworld or a Rodeo, even though they're far superior rappers to Travis Scott. No one had a mixtape run like Future. And as far as ASAP Rocky goes, again, there might be rappers who are technically stronger lyricists, but when we're talking catalogs, right, think of Rocky's first 3 projects. Think about everything I told you in this video, how different Rocky was from everything coming out of his region at the time, how different he was dressing from the rest of the game, how different he was rapping from everybody, the different sounds and genres he was incorporating into his music, the type of risks he would take with the people that he would collaborate with.
We slipping on.
I think one thing that's great about Rocky is, especially for the first half of his career, he never played it safe. He always went on these like creative adventures with, again, the sounds that he would incorporate into his music, but it never sounded like overly experimental, like it was trying to be something hard to digest that you had to really sit with and dissect, right? Like his music was still very kind of easy and smooth on the ears. It was always an enjoyable listening experience, even though he did push the boundaries for what hip-hop can sound like. So anyways, after the midpoint of the 2010s, after Rocky put out my favorite album of his, he started going more into his collab tape bag with the rest of the ASAP Mob members. You got the 2 Cozy tapes, and for a while, like between 2016, 2017, it really seemed like Rocky was about to be a leader of the next generation. Kind of like the runs that Kanye and Wayne had in the late 2000s when like they were at the top of their game, but they were also kind of ushering in the next set of stars and the next sound. You know, Kanye with Big Sean, Kid Cudi, Travis, etc. Wayne with Drake, Nicki, Tyga, and like all the little clones that were running around that sound exactly like Wayne.
Oh, Lil Wayne's just too good. Oh, Lil Wayne's just too good.
I thought we were going to get something similar with Rocky. You were getting back-to-back collab tapes with the ASAP Mob. And again, Rocky didn't, invent the mob. He wasn't signing or developing the artists within it, but he was obviously the front runner of ASAP. So anyone who had ASAP attached to their name, when you heard music from them, you kind of associated them automatically with Rocky. So it was around this time when we saw the emergence of ASAP Ferg, right? Standing right next to Rocky. Tyler and Rocky are collaborating heavily at this point, and this is when Tyler kind of pivots into his more alternative, pop-friendly bag at the same time with Flower Boy, right? And this is right around the time when he's standing very close to ASAP. Then Rocky signs Playboi Carti, who was one of the most promising artists of the SoundCloud era. You also had him standing next to Lil Uzi. You remember those like freestyles that they were doing together all the time?
Smoking no stank, other words dank, used to drink,
who's to blame? Diamonds on chain, look at the veins, vampire mane, diamonds on frame.
And aside from all these other artists, I mean, one of the biggest emerging superstars at this point in time, Travis Scott, he got his whole style, his whole flow, his whole sound from Rocky. I'm exaggerating. I mean, Travis definitely has a unique sound of his own, but the, very psychedelic, dream-like sounds that Travis Scott was using a lot on Rodeo, Astroworld, whatever the case is, it stemmed heavily from Kanye West, but there's no denying it also stemmed from ASAP Rocky. But while it did seem like Rocky was about to take things to another level, instead it seemed like after that second Cozy tapes, things started kind of dying down for ASAP Rocky. For all of the ASAP members, really. I mean, none of their careers really went anywhere except for Ferg. 12, he put out an album, but that flopped. The other co-founder, ASAP Bari, he had a S assault charge. Of course, rest in peace to Yams. Like, the 2 founders were basically gone. The entire mold of the group kind of fell apart, right? I mean, Ferg even removed the ASAP from his actual stage name.
Going from ASAP Ferg to Ferg, a form of growth in your career?
Everybody always call me Ferg, even in the mob. Like, people don't call me ASAP Ferg. Rocky be like Ferg, D Ferg, Daryl Ferguson. That's my name. ASAP Ferg is something we did as a crew together. So it's always been Ferg. It's just gone back to Ferg. Like, and I feel like it's just a new time. It's a new era. It's an exciting time for me to show people who I am.
Then 2018 comes around, we get Testing from A$AP Rocky, which from the jump, I mean, just from the title alone, you can tell this was Rocky trying to be as experimental as he possibly could, right? And I don't think that necessarily worked out in his favor, because while he did take a lot of creative risks on his previous 3 projects, like I had mentioned before, they still felt very digestible. They were smooth, almost hypnotizing listening experiences. With Testing, it felt a little different. It was a lot more rough around the edges, and I mean, Rocky's actual lyrical performances seemed like they took a major dip in quality. The flows weren't as sharp, the charisma wasn't as high. It was more about force-feeding, boundary pushing than it was actually just creating some dope music, in my opinion at least. It was also his lowest selling project up to that point, selling around 70,000 in the first week, his first album not to hit #1 on the charts. And while just a year before its release, it seemed like Rocky was going to be one of the leaders of the next generation, making his case for trailing right behind, the big 3 in terms of impact and influence and even numbers. Now at this point by 2018, he kind of takes a few steps back. This is the same year that Travis Scott has, his monstrous run with Astroworld. Tyler is, reaping the fruits of his labor with Flower Boy, really putting him into a different lane, like people seeing him in a more mainstream light at this point. Lil Uzi was on another level in terms of mainstream success. If you want to talk about, other rappers who kind of took that Rocky lane where they were making very hypnotic or alternative music, blending different genres together, XXX was the epitome of that in 2018. And then Carti had his most critically appraised album that year as well with Die Lit. I say all that to say it seemed like there were a lot of rappers that definitely took one piece of influence or another from A$AP in some regard. But at this point, A$AP was kind of falling out of favor while all these other guys were really almost lapping him creatively in terms of the bodies of work they were releasing, in terms of the moments they were creating, the influence they were having. And now this is why I said, remember at the beginning of the video, Rocky is in quite the interesting position because for the next 7 years, as we know, he didn't release a single project, right? From Testing in 2018 to not really getting the love or the reception he was hoping for to, then the next 7 years of him constantly teasing Don't Be Dumb, putting out a single or 2, and then sometimes even redacting it. Maybe we'll touch on that shortly in this video. Throughout that whole time, his presence is still very felt, right? Like, it's not like someone like Wayne, for example, my favorite rapper. Wayne took less time than Rocky, took around 4 years from the start of when he announced the Carter 5 to when he actually released it. He missed out on an entire generation of hip-hop listeners who didn't really feel his presence because he wasn't dropping music throughout that time period. Now granted, Lil Wayne was an interesting situation because everyone kind of took influence from Wayne, right? From Tyler to Kendrick to Young Thug, Future, Uzi, etc. He had a million clones running around the game, but without actual work of his own, once he did make his return, the landscape of hip-hop had evolved so much from 2014 to 2018 that the Carter 5 didn't really resonate with the new generation at the time. Whereas with Rocky, I feel like his spirit kind of lived on in a different way from Wayne. Like, he was still always in the news and the tabloids because of, his relationship with Rihanna. He was still viral because he was always doing these like big fashion collaborations and all that stuff. And his Spotify listeners were growing because this generation really resonated with Rocky's old catalog. Again, I think people underestimate how influential Rocky's sound is on the modern landscape of hip-hop to the point where he can still sell out a Rolling Loud. The younger generation is still going back to his first mixtape, Live Love A$AP, in 2011 and finding new songs to make viral. Like, if Rocky dropped Purple Swag today, if he dropped Goldie, if he dropped Lord Pretty Flacco Jody, I think these songs would be as big a hits today as they were back then, if not bigger. And that speaks to the influence that Rocky has had on the game today. Just to give you a quick comparison, like, I don't think a lot of Big Sean's hits from the 2010s, if he dropped them today, they wouldn't hit the same way. They wouldn't be nearly as big. And I think that speaks to the fact that Big Sean's sound did not really impact this next generation to the point where if his old hits came out today, they wouldn't be big because the landscape has changed so much. Whereas with Rocky, I think the landscape is kind of defined from a sound that he helped pioneer. 3 or really 4 of hip-hop's biggest superstars today all took a little piece of Rocky's identity and kind of implemented it into their own. Travis Scott, Playboi Carti, Tyler the Creator, and Lil Uzi. And that's why I say Rocky had the chance to really come in with a major moment with this project, because him at his best, him making the best A$AP Rocky music that A$AP Rocky possibly could, would, in my opinion, feel very congruent with the sounds that are popular in hip-hop today. So it's very weird to me that this is not the case. If we're looking at how many singles A$AP Rocky has released for this album, how many years he's been teasing it, it blows my mind how his old music is becoming more popular than ever, but every new single he put out somehow misses the mark. With the pandemic, with him, beginning to date Rihanna and them raising their first child, Rocky went on like a 3-year hiatus, but in May of 2021, he began teasing a new project. He did an interview with GQ where he said that a new album was in progress. He had tentatively titled it All Smiles, and he described the album as very experimental, doubling down on the experimentation that we saw him implement on testing. He said, there'd be music with Rihanna. This was going to be about a ghetto love tale. That's what the project would be. And that it was 90% complete. This was in 2021. Later that year in 2021, he does have the A$AP Rally incident, right? Where A$AP Rally pressed charges against him for, pulling out the hammer on him, allegedly. But that didn't stop the rollout. In spring of 2022, he released a song called DMB, That's My B. It was a song Rocky professing his love for Rihanna with her featured in the music video. Really dope visual, by the way. That's one thing about A$AP Rocky. He has by far some of the best music videos in the game. I mean, this song didn't really have much of an impact, but it wasn't bad, and it definitely fit into the theme that Rocky was going for, that he said in 2021, where the new album would be a ghetto love tale. But remember, he had teased the name All Smiles back then, but later in 2022, he had said that the album wouldn't actually be called that. In a Dazed interview, he said the album was done or being wrapped up, but again, not actually called All Smiles. It would have a new name. And it seemed like he was serious on that promise that the album was being wrapped up, because in September of that year, 2022, he headlined Rolling Loud New York, and they marketed that as being the last show before he drops his album. Keep in mind, we're getting it January of 2026, almost 4.5 years after, they made this big promise. But at the time, it didn't seem like it was complete cap. I mean, 2 months after this, in December, he has a promo on Amazon's Thursday Night Football where there was a quote that said, "Album finished, don't be dumb."
My first time back on the stage. Album finished, don't be dumb, let's go.
At the same time, he also releases a new single called Crapping Me. That song also didn't really feel like first single material, and it left no impact. About a month later, we get another single called Same Problems. This one must have had a big budget behind it, because there were vocals from Lil Yachty and Miguel on it, and it was produced by Tyler, A$AP Rocky himself, and Thundercat. Another song that was okay, didn't really leave much of an impact. He does an interview around that time to promote the song with Zane Lowe, where he says again, the album is coming for sure. That was exactly 3 years ago, January 2023. Later in 2023, he releases another single, Riot. He does an interview and claims that the album is going to have some massive producers and features. Tyler the Creator, Madlib, Hit-Boy, Alchemist, Metro Boomin, Mike Dean, Swedish House Mafia. They were all supposed to be producing this project. I don't know what happened. Rihanna, he said, was supposed to feature on it. Peso Pluma was supposed to feature on it. Mind you, this is, 2.5 years ago, but what happened to all these tracks? I don't know. And it seems like, with the release of 3-4 singles at this point, none of them gaining any traction, Rocky decides to go back to the drawing board, figure out, a new angle to take with this whole thing. Because we wouldn't hear from him for almost a year after he released that July 2023 single, Riot. He reappeared in April 2024, jumping on that Future and Metro Boomin album just to diss Drake, basically. Like, he literally in his verse said, "Yo, Metro and Future, you guys should have called me for the first album you did, not the second one, because I would have been right there with Kendrick, traumatizing and tantalizing the Toronto tough-talking Taylor Swift twin."
Spicy.
And there's more Drake disses on this new album. I don't know how much I'm going to get into this rabbit hole. I have a whole video breaking down their beef. And honestly, I mean, hey, as much as you guys call me a Drake glazer, I'm definitely objective, because I will tell you one thing. Rocky does not want it with Drake, all right? Not when Rocky's in this lyrical form. You know how J. Cole's talking about, the fall off was a concept that derived from him getting really comfy after the success of Forest Hills Drive. Like, he felt like, oh, maybe, I really want to retire at this point. Like, I'm comfy. That's how I envision A$AP Rocky right now. Like, he's with, Rihanna. He has a bunch of kids with her. She's up billions of dollars. He's deep in the fashion game, killing it there. Like, he's comfy right now. He's not, his pen is not sharp. Like, not that saying that Drake's really is either, but maybe he's got ghostwriters.
Study rap battles for a living.
He showed us on Family Matters that Rocky took something from him that none of these other guys in this big 20v1 took. His girl, right? Like, I don't know. To me, out of every single rapper that Drake was dissing throughout that battle when he should have kept his attention just on Kendrick Lamar, the rapper who got it the worst, like who Drake had the best bars aimed at, I think was A$AP Rocky. And at the same time, like, Drake is just the jealous crazy ex, right? He was the one sending all the shots at Rocky and Rihanna, saying that he's not hung up on her and that the sex with her was average. Just vile crap to be putting in a song. But it's like, again, he's just the nut job crazy ex. Just leave him alone. You're comfy right now. Anyways, whatever. After this whole 20v1 thing, August 2024, Rocky comes back saying that the album would actually drop on August 30th. You get pre-orders that go up. You get a brand new single, Hijack. I think this was actually a dope song. There were some Drake subliminals in there too. But I guess it didn't perform great. And literally 3 weeks after we got that new single, and just 9 days after the album was actually supposed to come out, August 21st, 2024, Rocky announces that the album had been delayed to September 20th, saying that, a bunch of leaks happened, like his songs got leaked, and that's why he wanted to make the best album ever. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there were that many songs that leaked in those, 3 weeks from when he announced the album to the point where he needed to delay the whole thing, and especially in this streaming era when all you got to do is just click a button and boom, your album's on streaming platforms. You don't need, weeks in advance to submit it to have the CDs pressed and all that crap. Like, it's very rare in the streaming era that we get a random last minute delay of an album. And with this delay, it kind of seems suspicious because he was just delaying the album by a month. What is a month going to do if the excuse was really about leaks, right? Because if it's really about leaks, that means you have to go back and redo the whole album. You need more than a month to do that. I don't know. These excuses were BS, right? It was probably the singles were flopping. He needed more time to build some hype, right? By September 2024, nothing actually ends up coming out. He says the album's going to come out in fall in an interview with Billboard. Then he does an interview with Dazed. And at this point, he stops telling people that the album's actually going to come out. He says he's putting the finishing touches on it. He's a perfectionist. People should expect the unexpected. And then to cap the year off, everyone who actually did pre-save the album when the link was up to do so for a short period of time back in August, everyone who ordered the vinyls and the CDs got refunds. This is when Rocky started rolling in the album. I mean, this was the first time in history I've ever seen an artist not roll out an album, but roll one in. Actually, sorry, J. Cole was the first one to do that because he put out Might Delete Later and then actually started deleting tracks off the project. Story for another video. By early 2025, that whole A$AP Relly case ends up coming to an end. Rocky's found not guilty. Perfect time to now release the project, right?
Cap.
Well, no. Instead, he makes a big announcement that he would now be the creative director of Ray-Bans, which kind of fit into everything Drake was talking about on his Family Matters diss when he said, maybe go model or go back into fashion, because when you release these songs, everyone's just going to say you should have went back to doing that because the music's mid. In March of 2025, he's now dodging his fans when they ask him, if the album's coming out.
Let me get an album. Come on.
Man, don't do me like that, bro. A$AP.
And Rocky seems to start, reamping the rollout by the summer of 2025. You get this kind of weird promo where if you text a certain number, 1855 get A$AP, you start hearing a snippet of a new A$AP Rocky song playing. Then he released an Apple Music exclusive track called Pray for the Gang, which was seemingly supposed to be, a brand new comeback single, right, for the project. However, the song performed so badly, not even making it onto the top 200 of the Apple Music chart when it was an Apple Music exclusive song. That because of how bad this song flopped, Rocky actually decided to make its music video private on YouTube just days after he actually put it out to the world and delete the record, following in J. Cole's footsteps. And this was seemingly a dark side of things to come, but Rocky actually turned things around because we finally ended up getting the project, right? He decided, F it, I'll put out a couple singles. I'm not going to care about what people think. I'm just going to let them have the project, whether they love it or they hate it. Now, why I personally thought this album was very important, in fact, could have been game-changing for not just Rocky's career, but for hip-hop as a whole, is because a lot of people, ever since the battle between Drake and Kendrick, have been talking about a shift going on within hip-hop, right? People were tired of the lazy, recyclable, formulaic songs that were coming out of the camps of artists like Drake, or a lot of these, very uninspired trap artists who saw their projects not really perform well in 2025 because people were sick of the status quo. Artists like Young Thug, Travis, Lil Baby, they all had some of their least inspired projects released in 2025 and their worst performing projects in that same year. Meanwhile, artists who were, putting an emphasis on lyricism or bringing storytelling back or, actually making real cohesive bodies of work, artists like Tyler, Kendrick, Clips, they were seeing more success than ever before. And like I said earlier in this video, Rocky kind of stood at a weird crossroads where, again, a lot of the biggest superstars today, in my opinion, have taken a lot of influence from Rocky, which would make it very easy for him to come back in the game and be more dominant and more relevant than ever. But at the same time, his new singles haven't really been hitting. He hasn't been able to kind of connect with the new generation through his new music. It's really only been his older music that's been, re-emerging on the charts and all that. So with that, he can also go, the other route where, like a lot of artists, at the later stage of their career, they fail to kind of capture a new audience or a younger audience, and they just tailor to, the smaller fan base that has stuck along for the ride from their heyday. So he's at that weird, crossroad, that weird paradox where can he ascend to the next level and join the upper echelon of, rappers from his generation, the Kendricks, the Coles, the Tylers, or will he potentially go, a Chance the Rapper and Wale route where he'll drop a phenomenal body of work, but maybe it's a little too mature for this younger generation to digest, or there's just a gap in the sound that is stopping people from embracing him. And I think that's where it's kind of weird, where hip-hop's in a bit of a weird space commercially, where the last 3-4 years have not really produced any new massive superstars. We've kind of lost that, that mid-tier of artists. Like, it's either you're on top of the world, or you have a really diehard niche fan base, niche following, or it's like you're like Joey Badass, you're selling 10K in the first week, you're still a phenomenal rapper, but something's missing, right? And I think this Rocky album was kind of like a test, no pun intended, on whether the culture still rewards ambition and experimentation with, lyricism or bars still being a major focus. Because as much, pop or sing-songy stuff that Rocky does, he's still rapping on 90% of his music, right? He's not known for any intricate wordplay or complex writing, but he's still rapping. Are people still listening to that kind of, I don't want to call him a mid-tier rapper, but somewhere in the middle between megastar and the underground artists? Is there still that interest for the middle class almost? Well, I'll tell you one thing's for sure, it'd be stupid to go into this album with any form of expectation, right? It's been 8 years. It doesn't matter if it's been 25 years, okay? He told us when, he first said he was working on a new album that he was going to focus heavily on experimentation. And I mean, I don't think Rocky is sitting there, years and years on end, like maybe J. Cole is with the Fall Off, where Rocky is analyzing every verse, making sure that every little bar is perfect and is going to blow your mind, right? The whole concept is so intricate in terms of the subject matter. I don't think that's where Rocky is going at this point in his career. Like I said earlier, the man is comfy, all right? Leave him alone. And I was able to tell from the singles, he was just kind of having fun with this stuff, right? So I personally, while I thought the stakes were high in terms of how this album performs, I think speaks to a larger conversation of where hip hop is going and the shift and everything. But in terms of just being an ASAP Rocky fan, I really had no expectations or standards. All I thought is that like he can either come in on some experimental music that I actually enjoy, which he's done in the past, that's very similar to what I think Tyler the Creator is doing right now. And in that case, I think he'll see a lot of success because this generation still does love Rocky, even though he's been absent throughout their, entire life pretty much. But then at the same time, Rocky could come in with a complete dud. And in that case, it would be, probably a flop like the Carter 6 or the Joey Badass project this year. I saw it going either way. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to go into this thing with, expecting anything because I don't want to be disappointed. And I think a big theme of this album, like Rocky had said, he was going to place an emphasis on experimentation. And you get that just from the constant, talking that Rocky does on the album, where he's basically telling the audience like, hey, I'm going to do what I want, whether you get it or not. People questioning why, he's not a player anymore, why he settled down, why he's switching sounds, or why he's experimenting so much. Like, that tension is kind of the backbone of this album. And the interludes in between kind of stand as a reminder to the audience that Rocky is just going to do him, whether, again, you get it or not. Now, the album starts off on a very celebratory note. The intro track, Order of Protection, it sets the tone right away with this haunted trap sound throughout the instrumental that really feels like a Metro Boomin inspired production. And Rocky comes in with an auto-tune hook that reminds me a lot of like Quavo or Future. So it's a little unconventional for Rocky, but still kind of generic in terms of the overall sound. Lyrically, he's giving a life update right off the rip. He's talking about, still being tied to the game. He, celebrates the fact that he beat his cases. He survived, everything over the last few years. The intro alone, it's definitely not the most experimental or compelling song on the album, but it works as an opener because it sounds like someone who has a lot to celebrate, which Rocky most definitely does. It's high energy, it's confident, it's triumphant, and it transitions perfectly into the energy that's carried through on the next song, Helicopter. And Rocky was talking about how, this album is filled with a bunch of his different alter egos, and I think this is where it starts to make a bit of sense. Like, the first few tracks on this project definitely represent the same alter ego or persona. There's, like, on the album cover, this loud green creature with a megaphone. And I think that that's the type of ASAP Rocky you're definitely getting with these high energy tracks. And I like it. Helicopter to me sounds like Lord Pretty Flacco Jody Part 2 with the video game style beat, the bouncy flow, the repetitive hook. It's almost like a spin off of that. But this is also where one of my main issues with the album starts showing up. See, Rocky overall, while the production is top tier, he himself sounds a bit rusty. And I thought he already sounded rusty on Testing compared to his prior albums, but it's even more apparent than ever on this one. And I'm not talking lyrically. Like, I've never, again, gone to Rocky for bars, but I'm referencing his delivery. Like, the beat on Helicopter is crazy. Like I said, it reminds me of Lord Pretty Flacco Jody Part 2. But on Pretty Flacco Jody Part 2, Rocky himself was matching the beat with his delivery, with his energy. He was going nuts. Whereas with Helicopter, it almost sounds like Rocky is kind of like uncomfortable or not confident catching a pocket on this beat, particularly with the verses when you really have to start hearing him rap. Like, the only time he kind of sounds confident here is when he's just repeating the hook over and over again. Even when the lyrics, get a bit more interesting subject matter wise, like when he talks about, his W's in the fashion industry, even then, like, the delivery just feels slightly off. It's like, it's kind of like someone who hasn't worked out in a while, right? Like, they still have the ability to get there. They still got the muscle, but they don't have the smoothness yet. Like, their reps are kind of looking stiff. That's what I get from Rocky's actual delivery on a lot of these songs. I do think the confidence bounces back on a song like Stole Your Flow. I mean, it better freaking bounce back on that one because he's taking a lot of shots on that song. This is a bold song to make. He's dissing both Travis Scott and Drake on this song. This has been the main headline about the album, is the fact that, he's coming after Drake on this song. I don't know. To me, I don't care to hear A$AP Rocky and Drake go back and forth. Neither of them are currently in the best shape lyrically. So what is it going to lead to, right? I honestly think there's a lot more to talk about with Rocky's career and this album in general than there is about the hypothetical of, him and Drake trading shots at each other, right? I mean, he's saying that first, someone stole his flow, then he stole their B word. And I mean, this is obviously in reference to Rihanna because he's with her. But what you guys also probably don't remember is that it was both Drake and Travis Scott who had dated Rihanna, allegedly. So, Rocky could be taking shots at both of them. He also talks about, you know, how it's now accepted for men to get BBLs. That's got to be about BBL Drizzy, right? I mean, there were other rappers who I think came out and admitted they got BBLs, but, you know, when you think BBL, you think La Brianna, the BBL buffoon, right? With his, like, Tetris block shaped abs, right? Like he's got the abs that look like a bunch of Tetris blocks. Now, Rocky actually kind of did address this entire situation, and I most definitely agree with him. He did an interview where they asked, you know, where did this issue with Drake actually stem from? And Rocky said, I don't know, we were friends, and then I just got a bunch of shots taken at me. So naturally, I'm going to respond. And I agree with Rocky 100%. Funny enough, I actually think that Drake would probably lyrically destroy Rocky. If we're being real here, I think Drake at this point, either him or his ghostwriters, has the sharper pen. We saw that with Family Matters versus the shots that Rocky was sending. Also, Drake is the one who lost something, right? He lost Rihanna. He's the one harboring that resentment, harboring that anger. Rocky's a happy family man who's very comfy right now, dating a billionaire, right? I don't think he has much to lose, and therefore doesn't have that chip on his shoulder. Drake is the one angry, and the angrier the person, the more lethal the ghostwriter's bars are going to be. But yeah, Rocky had said, like, he doesn't know where this came from. Drake was just sending shots his way one day.
Internet's gonna decide who you're talking about on that
For
song.
sure. I think we all know.
They're gonna say it's Drake.
Yeah.
That's a man who was with you in those early days too.
sure.
Brought you on tour. Where did things go wrong in that relationship?
I mean, I don't know. I started just seeing people who just started out as friends and just became foes, seemed like they was unhappy for you, and just started sending shots. I think that's what led to any of our misunderstandings. So it really ain't smoke.
Does it feel resolvable to you, or you think it's too far?
Nah, it don't even need to be.
And I think, like the album title, Don't Be Dumb, right? We know where this derived from. This derived from Rihanna. I mean, the first shot I can remember Drake actually sending to Rocky, and I could be wrong, but I think it was on Fear of Heights off his 2023 album For All the Dogs, where he was, again, questioning why people are making it seem like he's still hung up on Rihanna. The sex with her was average. He takes shots at Rocky directly, saying that man is still with you. He can't leave. Basically, like, you wear the pants in this situation. You're the billionaire, right? He has no choice but to stay, trapped with you. You got 2 kids together, which I don't think is such a bad situation, right? And I understand Rocky for being upset about this. Like, these were just random shots for no reason. And you're talking about your sex life with the girl that, is now the mother of Rocky's 2 kids. I mean, obviously, he can't be too happy about this, right? And Rocky sends back some pretty lethal bars of his own aimed at Drake about, his role as a family man, as a parent, saying that, he's not actually there for his kids, essentially.
Spicy.
But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, a beef between Rocky and Drake just doesn't really interest me. Not in the big 2026. But what does interest me is the phenomenal track that comes right after this Drake diss record, Stay Here for Life. Up until this point, the album felt very energetic, chaotic, confrontational, with Rocky constantly asserting himself and punching back against criticism. But that's why Stay Here for Life feels like such a beautiful moment, because it completely switches up the vibe. The production is groovy, it's bright, it's fuzzy, it's warm. Rocky sounds like way more reflective here than he does on the first half of the album. He's talking about the beauty of life, having a new perspective, wishing he could buy more time. Ultimately, this song feels and sounds like a love letter to Rihanna, but it's a lot more vibrant and heartfelt than, his previous songs dedicated to her, like DMB or even Fashion Killer. Brent Faiyaz's vocals on this song are amazing too, and it kicks off the long theme production-wise on this project, where a lot of these songs towards the later half of them start slowing down into this, lush kind of hypnotic outro. A lot of these songs have these extended moody outro, and on this one you get this like 3-6 Mafia style sample over these lush drums. The whole thing feels again hypnotic. Between the production, the vocals, and the transition, overall this song ultimately just sounds like a collage, like a buffet of different sounds and samples just done right. And on first listen, this is by far my favorite song off the album. And one thing I noticed as the album progresses is how much Rocky is actually carrying, most of the heavy lifting by himself. I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, my major criticism is that I don't feel like he's really confident in his delivery or experimenting with new flows enough. But I hadn't realized that, the first half of the album, and really like the whole thing damn near, there's like 2 rap verses, a couple different hooks sporadically, but ultimately it's Rocky handling a lot of the heavy lifting. And even though he may not sound as confident as he once did, the project is still pretty entertaining. So I think Rocky gets some points for that alone. Like, on a lot of Rocky's past projects, the biggest moments from those albums came from the big features he had, the big posse cuts, Effin' Problems, One Train, right? Every Day. Those songs were very feature heavy. Even on Testing, the biggest song off there, Praise the Lord, that was with Skepta. My favorite album from him, At Long Last ASAP, I think there was a feature on every song, right? Here on Don't Be Dumb, it's mostly Rocky running the show. And for the most part, it stays entertaining just off the production and the vibe alone, even when, again, the performances aren't always, top tier. And yeah, the production is definitely the driving force off the album. Like, songs like Trespassing, they feel like a mix of early 2000s Pharrell, but he's still going for that, like, kind of collage of sounds type vibe, because the Pharrell type beat meshes in with this, harder, more modern beat all in one song. Like, it's kind of all over the place, but it also really sounds good. Stop Snitching, it goes for a more, anthemic rap moment, but then he quickly switches it up with songs like Stafu, which is more of like a industrial techno type of song. Then you get Punk Rocky as the next track, and that's like, an alternative rock type of song. So it's like, you never really know what direction the album is going to head in. There's nothing at all that's really memorable lyrically, but everything is very interesting from a Sonics perspective. And while from like a pure rap perspective, there's no big moments on this album, a lot of the actual performances lyrically fall flat just because there's, weak hooks, weak delivery. But if we're just talking like listening experience, I still think this is pretty decent. One of the most interesting moments off the album is the song Robbery with Doechii. There's these, jazz piano chords filtered all throughout the beat. You get these smooth, kind of almost ASMR style vocals from Doechii, and there's this like conversational back and forth between her and A$AP Rocky for the entire song, which they have some pretty decent chemistry. It's not really something that has high replay value, but I think the whole premise of this song is that it's supposed to feel like, an old gangster movie. The whole Bonnie and Clyde high fashion robbery concept, I think it works really well. And again, this song comes right after, I believe, Punk Rocky on the track list. So it kind of shows you that there's no willingness to conform on this album in the slightest. And more so than not, the experimental aspects of it actually do end up landing. And I think he, caps off the album with something that actually feels like a real closer. The outro track, the end, this is easily one of my favorite tracks off the album. The sample is a child repeating the line, "This is the way the world ends," in this like haunting tone. And then Rocky actually zooms out for once, talking about, issues plaguing society, talks about the prison system, problems in the government, the bad food that they're feeding in schools, the rise in school shootings. I mean, it's kind of like an odd placement on this type of project, because the whole project feels like it's centered around Rocky kind of flipping off his critics and his haters, right? Just doing him, celebrating, the W's in his life, and embracing his experimental creative kinks while bragging about, everything that the risks he's taken have brought into his life. But then, he actually gets deep into what's going on in the outer world, only on this outro though. So I found it interesting that he decided to kind of cap off the album with this type of tone, but I do appreciate it for sure. It was a great final statement, and I think that the will.i.am hook, I haven't heard will.i.am in years, and with this album, because I was kind of expecting that he would have some really big budget crazy features, I wanted to do the thing where I don't look at any of the features, I just go into the album straight, not knowing who I'm about to listen to, so it's kind of like a pleasant surprise when you hear a familiar voice. I heard Tyler, the Creator, on one of the deluxe tracks. I thought that was pretty interesting, or the bonus track, whatever you'd call it. That was a good song. The Doechii feature was kind of cool, the chemistry they had there. Westside Gunn, he comes in with a couple ad-libs. Overall, features were kind of underwhelming, but I actually appreciate that because, again, I think that led Rocky for the first time since possibly his first mixtape ever, Live Love ASAP, to actually be, the leading star and the main focus for the entire project. With most of his albums, that wasn't the case. He was, again, like I said earlier in this video, kind of playing like puppeteer, like a Kanye role, where he's bringing people into his world. With this project, it's like he's definitely the leading voice and maybe even the side character and the back character. I guess that's why there's all these alter egos on the album cover, right? Because this is really every side to Rocky. But yeah, I say all that to say I was pleasantly surprised to just randomly hear will.i.am pop up in my headphones for the first time in like 10 years. That was great to hear. And yeah, those are my thoughts. I think this is a good album. I think it's like, a solid 6, 7 on 10, 6, 7. Yes. I spent half this video talking about, how Rocky should connect with the younger generations. I got to do the same thing, right? It's a 6, 7. I would actually give it, funny enough, 6.7 out of 10. That's what I would give it. Let's say like the Clips album was like a 9 on 10. Maybe even higher, but let's call it 9. This would be like 6.7, just to give you a reference point on that. In the early Rapaholics days, we used to have the 6W system. I forget what they are at this point. Drop a comment if somehow you remember that. I think I used it to rate like 3 different albums on 3 different videos, like way back in the day. So if you remember that, like drop a comment. I will do something special for you for sure. And ultimately, I mean, is this album going to change the game? Probably not. Is this going to bring Rocky, you know, to the big leagues, to the upper echelons, to the big 3? No, I don't think so. I think that, you know, Tyler had kind of taken the place that I thought Rocky would be in by this point in time. I'm not necessarily disappointed because I think Rocky exists better anyways when there's less pressure on him. Like, that's when we get the best creative output from him. You know, his first mixtape, there was no real pressure on him at that point in time. His 2015 album, At Long Last ASAP, that seemed like him not really facing the label pressure of having, you know, this big budget and having to make this big debut statement. Like, so I feel like he kind of went, you know, the more experimental route there, and it really worked in his favor. Then with Testing, you know, he took a long time in between his 2015 album to now 2018. So maybe there was more pressure there, and that's why it didn't turn out so great. And with this one, I definitely think it's a step up from Testing. We'll see how it ages, but I don't think this is changing the trajectory of hip-hop or being, you know, indicative or representative of a major shift happening. I do think a shift is happening. I don't think this project or this moment from Rocky is spearheading that shift. So, as always, let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I study
Rapaholics
for a living.